Speaking from 21 South Street.
The villagers used this road to go to the market town. Some used the bus, a few rode on mules, most people walked. Today, everyone on the road turned their heads to stare at the girl with the bright blue umbrella. Binya sat down in the shade of a pine tree. The umbrella, still open, lay beside her. She cradled her head in her arms and presently she dozed off. It was that kind of the day, sleepily warm and summery. And while she slept, a wind sprang up. It came quietly, swishing gently through the trees, humming softly. Then it was joined by other random gusts bustling over the tops of the mountains. The trees shook their heads and came to life. The wind fanned Binya's cheeky. The umbrella stirred on the grass. The wind grew stronger, picking up dead leaves and sending them spinning and swirling through the air. It got into the umbrella and began to drag it over the grass. Suddenly, it lifted the umbrella and carried it about 6 feet from the sleeping girl. The sound woke Binya. She was on her feet immediately, and then she was leaping down the steep slope, but just as she was within reach of the umbrella, the wind picked it up again and carried it further downhill. Binya set off in pursuit. The wind was in a wicked, playful mood. It would leave the umbrella alone for a few moments, but as soon as Binya came near, it would pick up the umbrella again and send it bouncing, floating, dancing away from her. The hill grew steeper. Binya knew that after 20 yards it would fall away in a precipice. She ran faster, and the wind ran with her, ahead of her, and the blue umbrella stayed up with the wind. A fresh gust picked it up and carried it to the very edge of the cliff. There it balanced for a few seconds before toppling over out of sight. Binya ran to the edge of the cliff. Going down on her hands and knees, she peered down the cliff face. About 100 feet below, a small stream rushed between the great boulders. Hardly anything grew on the cliff face, just a few stunted bushes, and halfway down, a wild cherry tree growing crookedly out of the rocks and hanging across the chasm. The umbrella had stuck in the cherry tree. Binya didn't hesitate. She may have been timid with strangers, but she was at home on a hillside. She stuck her bare leg over the edge of the cliff and began climbing down. She kept her face to the hillside, feeling her way with her feet, only changing her handhold when she knew her feet were secure. Sometimes she held onto the thorny bilberry bushes, but she did not trust the other plants, which came away very easily. Loose stones rattled down the cliff. Once on their way, the stones did not stop until they reached the bottom of the hill, and they took other stones with them, so that there were soon a cascade of rocks and stones, and Binya had to be very careful not to start a landslide. As agile as a mountain goat, she did not take more than 5 minutes to reach the crooked cherry tree. But the most difficult task remained. She had to crawl along the trunk of the tree, which stood out at right angles from the cliff. Only by doing this, she could reach the trapped umbrella. Binya felt no fear when climbing trees. She was proud of the fact that she could climb them as well as Bijju. Gripping the rough cherry bark with her toes and using her knees as leverage, she crawled along the trunk of the projecting tree until she was almost within reach of the umbrella. She noticed with dismay that the blue cloth was torn in a couple of places. She looked down and it was only then that she felt afraid. She was right over the chasm. Looking down, she felt quite dizzy. Her hands shook, and the tree shook too. If she slipped now, there was only one direction in which she could fall. Down, down into the depths of the dark and shadowy ravine. There was only one thing to do. Concentrate on the patch of blue just a couple of feet away from her. She did not look down or up, but straight ahead. And willing herself forward, she managed to reach the umbrella. She could not crawl back with it in her hands. So, after dislodging it from the forked branch in which it had stuck, she let it fall, still open, into the ravine below. Cushioned by the wind, the umbrella floated serenely downwards, landing on a thicket of nettles. Binya crawled back along the trunk of the cherry tree. 20 minutes later, she emerged from the nettle clump, her precious umbrella held aloft. She had nettle strings all over her legs, but she was hardly aware of the smarting. She was as immune to nettles as Bijju was to bees. About 4 years previously, Bijju had knocked a hive out of an oak tree and had been badly stung about the face and legs. It had been a painful experience, but now if a bee stung him, he felt nothing at all. He had been immunized for life. He was on his way home from school. It was 2 o'clock and he hadn't eaten since 6 in the morning. Fortunately, the kingora bushes, the bilberries, were in fruit, and already Bijju's lips were stained purple with the juice of the wild sour fruit. He didn't have any money to spend at Ram Bharosa's shop, but he stopped there anyway to look at the sweets in their jars. "And what will you have today?" asked Ram Bharosa. "No money," said Bijju. "You can pay me later." Bijju shook his head. Some of his friends had taken sweets on credit, and at the end of the month, they had found they had eaten more sweets than they could possibly pay for. As a result, they had to hand over to Ram Bharosa some of their most treasured possessions, such as a carved knife for cutting grass, or a small hand axe, or a jar of pickles, or a pair of earrings, and these had become the shopkeeper's possessions and were kept by him or sold in his own shop. Ram Bharosa had set his heart on having Binya's blue umbrella, and so naturally he was anxious to give credit to either of the children, but so far neither had fallen into the trap. Bijju moved on, his mouth full of kingora berries. Halfway home, he saw Binya with the cows. It was late evening and the sun had gone down, but Binya still had the umbrella open. The 2 small wrens had been stitched up by her mother. Bijju gave his sister a handful of berries. She handed him the umbrella while she ate the berries. "You can have the umbrella until we get home," she said. It was her way of rewarding Bijju for bringing her the wild fruit. Calling Neelu, Gori, Binya and Bijju set out for home, followed at some distance by the cows. It was dark before they reached the village, but Bijju still had the umbrella open. Most of the people in the village were a little envious of Binya's blue umbrella. No one else had ever possessed one like it. The schoolmaster's wife thought it was quite wrong for a poor cultivator's daughter to have such a fine umbrella while she, a second-class BA, had to make do with an ordinary black one. Her husband offered to have their old umbrella dyed blue. She gave him a scornful look and loved him a little less than before. The pujari, who looked after the temple, announced that he would buy a multicolored umbrella the next time he was in the town. A few days later, he returned, looking annoyed and grumbling that they weren't available except in Delhi. Most people consoled themselves by saying that Binya's pretty umbrella wouldn't keep out the rain. If it rained heavily, that it would shrivel in the sun. If the sun was fierce, that it would collapse in a wind if the wind was strong, that it would attract lightning if lightning fell near, and it would prove unlucky if there was any ill luck going about. Secretly, everyone admired it. Unlike the adults, the children didn't have to pretend. They were full of praise for the umbrella. It was so light, so pretty, so bright a blue, and it was just the right size for Binya. They knew that if they had said nice things about the umbrella, Binya would smile and give it to them to hold for a little while. Just a very little while. Soon it was the time of the monsoon. Big black clouds kept piling up and thunder rolled over the hills. Binya sat on the hillside all afternoon, waiting for the rain. As soon as the first big drop of rain came down, she raised the umbrella over her head. More drops, big ones, came pattering down. She could see them through the umbrella silk as they broke against the cloth. And then there was a cloud burst, and it was like standing under a waterfall. The umbrella wasn't really a rain umbrella, but it held up bravely. Only Binya's feet got wet. Rods of rain fell around her in a curtain of shivered glass. Everywhere on the hillside, people were scurrying for shelter. Some made for a charcoal burner's hut, others for a mule shed or Ram Bharosa's shop. Binya was the only one who didn't run. This was what she had been waiting for, rain on her umbrella. And she wasn't in a hurry to go home. She didn't mind getting her feet wet. The cows didn't mind getting wet either. Presently, she found Bichu sheltering in a cave. He would have enjoyed getting wet, but he had his school books with him and he couldn't afford to let them get spoiled. When he saw Binya, he came out of the cave and shared the umbrella. He was a head taller than his little sister, so he had to hold the umbrella for her while she held his books. The cows had been left far behind. "Neelu, Neelu," called Binya. "Gori," called Bichu. When the mother saw them sauntering home through the driving rain, she called out, "Binya, Bichu, hurry up and bring the cows in. What are you doing out in the rain?" "Just testing the umbrella," said Bichu.